Hi, this is Pam with ROC Metaphysical, your metaphysical online magazine. It's called ROC Metaphysical because I'm in Rochester, New York. So hopefully people will get the understanding of that. It is historically the home of the Fox sisters. So if anybody knows that, they were at least 2 or 3 sisters that brought spiritualism to the forefront. So we have book reviews that we do, and we're doing them through Zoom so we can get to know the authors and about the books that they are writing. And today we're interviewing Mona. Is it Sobhani?
Yes.
Am I close?
You got it.
Oh, wow. All right, I did good. So I guess I should say my name is Pam Perkins, just in case people wonder who I am. I'm the chief and editor of the magazine, and the magazine comes out with new articles the first of each month. So I am talking to Mona because, all right, hopefully you're gonna see it. I loved her book. So love, love, love. And the reason why I love it is because Mona is a scientist, a neuroscientist, I think is your title, right?
Yep.
And she's written a book about the whole umbrella of metaphysical topics and subjects that a lot of people come across in their everyday life, TV, movies, they see something on YouTube. And so I loved it that she takes all these topics and talks about them from a logical science point of view and offers insight into why they occur, proof either from her, or what I love is you give studies of other people who have been investigating all kinds of things that they have found their proof in all these different topics. So it was like intuition was a topic, or psychic mediumship, where people can see, hear, feel, taste spiritual messages from people, or just have this knowing about either something going on or with a person who has passed on and they get messages. So that's what a psychic medium is. Past life regression, you kind of touch on quantum physics a little bit, remote viewing. I mean, it's a lot of territory you cover. So we were talking about consciousness before I hit the record button. So I was wondering if you want to kind of talk about consciousness,
Sure.
what you think it is, what science thinks it is.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm a neuroscientist, but I was never interested in consciousness that much. We all have our specialties in our field, and consciousness was not my specialty. And in the beginning, when I started this journey, I didn't see how it was related to anything, but over time, I found a lot of philosophies that kept referencing it. And that kind of forced me to stop and think about, what do they mean by consciousness, versus what does neuroscience think of consciousness? It kind of made me do that deep dive, because it seemed like people were talking about a different thing. Like every way it was referenced seemed to be referencing some different concept. So I mean, in neuroscience, and I think generally consciousness is our conscious subjective experiences of being alive. The question I always think of is, how are we aware that we are aware? And it's how, whatever it's like to be me, is my consciousness, and whatever it's like to be you is your consciousness. And then when we describe it to each other, we're never going to know exactly what the other person experiences. So it's very subjective in that way. But we know that we're aware of being aware, and humans presumably are unique in this way, or not, depending on which worldview you adopt. So yeah, and in classic neuroscience in the field, they do think of consciousness in that way, but when we go to do studies on consciousness, a lot of times there's a lot of focus on just like cognition or perception. And they sometimes focus on what's in your conscious awareness is what they call it, meaning what are you aware of? Like if I show you something and ask you if you've seen it, then you're consciously aware of it. So there's a lot of focus on that, which is like a little bit different than what I found to be what the definition of consciousness is when you hit the metaphysical or spiritual literatures. But that's,
Right.
yeah, that's kind of where I was coming from.
And so when you said you took a deep dive, is that because with your family and doing the tea leaf readings, is that kind of one of the things that kind of sparked the interest in this and trying to find out more?
Yes, that was that's probably the key thing was I'm Persian by cultural heritage, and in our culture, as in many other cultures, we have a practice of divination. In my family anyway, we use this Armenian or Turkish coffee, which is it's a little bit thicker. It has grounds that you keep in the cup, and then you flip the cup, let the grounds dry. They turn into pictures, and if you're lucky enough to have an intuitive reader, they can look at the grounds, look for symbols and pictures and stories, and intuit things about your past, present, and future. And my grandmother was skilled in this, and my mother's skilled in it. And I've never paid attention to it. I mean, ever. It was always in the background of our family parties, but I didn't even know what they were doing. And then until graduate school, when I would go home on the weekends, I would have coffee, to bond with my mom. And she would absentmindedly turn the cup over and just read for me. And at first I didn't, I let her do it. It's a bonding moment. I didn't really believe in it, but I let her do it. But over the years, I noticed that a lot of what she said came true. And so I started taking really copious, careful notes to see like what comes true, what doesn't, what are the patterns. And I could not explain it with my scientific training. There's nothing in our scientific paradigm that allows for that, because a lot of the things you would see would be for the future. So, in our paradigm, we assume time moves forward, that's impossible to look into the future. So even if I wanted to look to my science, I wouldn't have found an explanation. So I just kind of kept it separate in my head, but I knew that it worked and it was pretty reliable. And I had, as I explained in the book, two big events that my mom predicted that were pretty big emotional, life-changing events for me. And so the readings took on a bigger significance after those events and made me really curious, because I think I was also, as I say in the book, I kind of had a dark night of the soul, like an existential crisis. So in that time period, I just got curious because I was cracked open. I was desperate for something because my worldview was not working for me. My worldview that the universe was meaningless and random and dead and mechanistic was not comforting to me. And so, so I turned to looking into what does this interesting phenomena have to tell us about the nature of time, the nature of reality, the nature of our universe, and how wrong do we have it in science? So that, threw me down the rabbit hole.
Right. And so with your scientific background, what was your analysis of how your family could tune in? Is it going back to consciousness or energy?
Oh, yeah, I found so many different models, and I think I don't know, I didn't stick to one model because I don't think anyone actually knows, but the one I lean towards, I think now, but I'm also open to changing and collecting data every single day. But when I did start digging into the literature on consciousness and spirituality, and then the evidence for psychic phenomena and remote viewing and all that, I started to see, because at first it was very confusing to me how it could all be related. And then I read some of these models that even though we assume matter is the fundamental component of the universe, and matter comes together, builds on itself, and creates this reality we see, that perhaps it's not. And perhaps something like consciousness, which even though we can't define it. I can't give you a chemical structure for it, whatever it is. Perhaps that's more fundamental. And it would make sense if we're all connected in some broader consciousness, but that we individually have the capacity to connect to that broader consciousness under certain, circumstances, or certain people are better at it than others or whatnot. But that kind of, I mean, at first that was very hard for me to even entertain that notion, because it's so counter to what we're trained to study and believe in traditional neuroscience and traditional mainstream science. And it really took a while to even entertain that idea. And I had to read a lot and just keep doing thought experiments and thinking, well, what if, and forcing myself to stay curious and open-minded. But yeah, in the end, it made more sense. In the end, the model we use doesn't explain these phenomena. They're just unexplained. They're just ignored. They're considered impossible. And instead of trying to explain them, we just say, you imagined it, or
Right.
you've created meaning out of it. It's not real. But the thing is that it's pretty well documented, across human history, across all cultures, and there's actually scientific evidence for it. So it doesn't really make sense to say that anymore. But instead, we need a model that accommodates the data.
Right. And
yeah.
I think, the simple, example would be like, you think about somebody that you haven't seen in years, and then the phone rings and it's that person.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
how did that happen? So there's some energetic component, or, it's like consciousness is just like, like this just huge band, and it just kind of, I related to that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise,
Right.
where it was like the TV in the air, and all that information was, screens in the air. And that's how I kind of generalize it. Like, it's all the information is just kind of out there, and then somehow you touch and tap into it. And that's, how, you think about somebody, and either your energy prompted that person to call you, or that person was thinking about you and you picked up on it, and then you knew, that somebody you haven't spoken to in a really long time suddenly calls you out of the blue.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of studies actually looking at that. And like, I think people who are more emotionally bonded have stronger links between each other. But it's very common. And it is possible, of course, that there's a physicalist explanation, and that there's some sort of energy or information that we just can't measure yet. So of course that's possible. We just haven't discovered what that is, which is fine, because we don't know a lot of things about the universe. Like, we don't know what dark matter is, and it makes up 98% of the universe. So, or dark energy, there's a lot of things we don't know. So it's possible it's physical. It's possible it's requires a bigger rethinking of a philosophy, like saying consciousness is fundamental, whatever that means. So there's a lot of options, but all I know after my journey was that whatever we believe in right now is not the full story. It can't be.
Right. I think it's just tip of the iceberg, when you think about it. I mean, a friend of mine shared a story over the weekend. She was holding a small crystal ball, and a family member was very ill, and she went to bed holding this little crystal ball.
Mm-hmm.
The next day she woke up and the ball was gone, and her aunt called her and said, "I found this little crystal ball."
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And I mean, she said, my aunt, there's no way her aunt would have that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I said, well, it could be a bunch of different things, but it's a great story, and it gives us, the desire to want to know more, like, why did it happen and how come?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what keeps everything so interesting, is that, these things happen, and we're learning more and understanding, all these things that are happening. I know one of the other things you talked about was remote viewing, which
Right.
is another whole topic. Like it's that movie, Men Staring at Goats.
Oh my goodness, yes. I I watched it recently. It was very funny.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, but it's also, has a little bit of truth about it where the government has been working with people
Yeah.
to do remote viewing. And if people don't know what remote viewing is, that um, people could be in a room with no distractions and then they think about someone or something in a location and they can actually see, if you're thinking about a person, they're sitting in a house and they're in their pink chair and they're watching TV, and it does happen. And I belong to another group, and you mentioned Ingo Swann,
Yes. Yeah.
and I've read one of his books. I don't know if you had an opportunity,
I
but
haven't, but you're the second person who's asked me that. So maybe
right,
I'll.
it's online for free. You can read
Oh,
it.
okay.
He was a remote viewer, I think, for the government at one time, but
Yeah.
then all kinds of unique people reached out to him to do work, and his book is they should make a movie out of it because it just doesn't even seem true. But
Yeah.
um,
That
so,
that yeah, the remote viewing work was hard. I think the first kind of set of data that I came across that started to convince me that there was actually science behind psychic phenomena, because remote viewing is basically, they're all similar. They're all called different things, but it's the same um, phenomena, really. It's, having access to other places and other times through your mind and getting accurate information in that way. But you're right. Yeah, the government had funded this for like 25 plus years, and from multiple different agencies like NASA and then the CIA and then Army intelligence. And they even trained Army officers, I think, to use the capabilities in operational settings. So that it was that reliable.
mhm,
And which so the just all of that data together. I read the papers, I read all their books, I even spoke to two of the physicists who were involved in it, and yeah, it was just very convincing to me personally. I know that some people don't, I don't know, they think the government puts misinformation out, but that would, in my opinion, be a lot of misinformation to put out. So it's pretty interesting work.
it is. And I mean, Lily Dale, which is a spiritual community that's well known
Mhm.
if you're into spiritual classes and locations like Sedona. In the summertime, they have classes there, and it's a pretty popular place. Lots of big name people come and teach classes, like Lisa Williams and that kind of thing. And so they teach remote viewing classes.
Yes, I've seen them online. I haven't done one, but I've seen that they're available online also.
Right. Yeah. And, I think they've had like some police people come in and qualified, probably psychic mediums that have been trained in very specific ways because they're trying to be very professional. And I know people that work with police groups that they do provide a lot of really great information, and they want to be very serious, taken very seriously. And it's all facts and figures. It isn't, you know, it isn't just like I think, I see this. They actually can see, like house numbers and motor vehicle license plate numbers and very specific information, just like the Army would do. Like, where is
Exactly, yeah.
that tank in this country, where's it going, and who's involved. So I just love the fact that you talk about remote viewing, and then you talked about Brian Weiss and, past life regression. And that's a whole interesting topic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was, that was the that was a thing that was kind of the doorway into the coffee readings were kind of my doorway into psychic phenomena, psi phenomenon, divination, whatever you want to call it. And then Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters, was the doorway into thinking about a broader or any spiritual framework, because he talks about that idea that Earth is a school and that we come here to learn lessons and that we evolve our souls and come back to do it again and again through reincarnation. And I was not spiritual. Actually, I was anti-spirituality and anti-religion, quite aggressively so, before all of this. So I had never even thought about any spiritual frameworks at all. But his book kind of piqued my interest because he was a well-credentialed, well-trained psychiatrist. And it caused me to, just dig into that literature, that entire literature, because it was so healing too. That's what I was interested in also, is like, not just that he was reporting this spiritual framework from his patients, or not just that, that he seemed to get confirmation or validation of, through her, that there were actually, he calls them spirits, but whatever they may be, giving information through her. But in addition to that, that the methodology, was so healing for people when other methods had not been. And as a neuroscientist, like, I'm interested in mental health. And so that really interested me. And then I dug into all the transpersonal psychology literature from Stan Grof, and all of that, which was just kind of an extension of past life regression. Like, it moved into breath work and psychedelic work, but very similar themes. And that was, I love all that work, because I just think it's a very interesting place where it's an intersection, right? These altered states where you encounter the spiritual, the transpersonal or paranormal, and then also personal healing. So I think it's really beautiful.
Well, that's a nice way to put it. When you just said that, it's kind of pulling, different aspects together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever count like how many books? I wondered, when I read your book, how many books did this girl go through?
Oh yeah, I read a lot. Of course, I just keep buying them. So I have like piles and piles, and then also Kindle, and I can't even keep track. I'm just trying to plow through them. It becomes easier. In the beginning, it was slower because I would encounter concepts I wasn't familiar with, and I would have to stop and think and battle in my mind, like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And now it's easier. I can just consume it much faster.
Well, I think we're similar in some respects, that, I kind of want to know why and how come, from a logical explanation. So, I probably easily have read 2,000-3,000 books on all different topics that come under this whole umbrella, and there's still so much more, which I guess it keeps me, I guess not entertained, but, enticed, I guess, because there isn't the definitive answer for everything. And so it's always going to be learning more, knowing more, coming to a better understanding as we become more aware, as our consciousness gets bigger and better.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think in my old me, I would have, science was my religion. So I didn't like uncertainty, but now I can see that there are mysteries, right? The nature of the universe is uncertain on purpose, probably. So I think once you accept that, and instead of, being thrown off by that uncertainty, if you can just look at it with awe and wonder, like it seems like you do, and like open-mindedness and curiosity, then, that's beautiful. Like, what a beautiful, meaningful experience. And why wouldn't you engage in that way? It's much better than the other way, I think, based on my experience.
All right. So, the book, it's kind of interesting, that you kind of fell into that, and did you ever think about, was there a greater purpose for you to write the book?
It definitely crossed my mind.
That's a tough question, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely crossed my mind. It's also because, looking back on it too, it was so strange how it happened. I didn't do any of this research to write a book or anything. I did it for myself to find the answers to the universe, as I say in the book. I just wanted to figure it all out, right? I didn't want uncertainty. I wanted to know. And so I did all this research and interviews and all that. And then from the suggestion of one of my mentors, he just kind of suggested, you have all these notes, these interviews, why don't you just write it up, at least for yourself, to pull it all together? And I did, and I wrote half of the book very, very quickly, like in 2 weeks, over winter break. And as soon as I started, it was like this compulsion, like it just was so fast. It just happened very quickly. And it was like unstoppable. Like I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I would get to work and then do my day job and then go to bed because I was so tired. And just for 2.5 months, I finished it. And so it was very strange, because it's not like I set out with that goal, even though I am usually very goal driven, but I didn't even have that goal in mind. It kind of just happened. So sometimes, I don't know, I wonder.
So maybe, it's yet to be revealed,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we may never know, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, I just have to say, for those people that are wondering or questioning or, want to open the door a little bit to understanding this kind of information, I think the book is so great, because you're coming from not really into it to going, I wonder, and there's all this other data from other scientists, that it's kind of building, the road to get there. And, you question and you wonder. So, it's not like you're just saying, oh, I know it for a fact. I like that you're always kind of saying, well, I kind of think this, and the fact says this. So I think you're bringing it in a way that the average person would be wondering and questioning if this is new to them, or they're just coming into it, like a lot of younger people, that are realizing this, and I think it's a great way to start. So, we should tell everybody on their spiritual journey that, this is a great book to kind of help, look at the different topics, maybe read some of the other authors, so that they can understand why you said, Weiss's information was great, or, I can't remember some of the other names that you referred to.
Yeah. And I really wanted to capture that journey, because I found a lot of books that did summarize the evidence, but I remember thinking, I'm almost reading the same book over and over again, from different authors, slightly different viewpoints, slightly different data. But what I was encountering as I was reading those, as a person going through a transformation, was all of my psychological stuff and my resistance and my sadness. It was changing my identity and all this stuff that came up, and how difficult it was. And that's why one of the reasons I was reaching out to people to interview them privately, just for me, was to find support, and like to find, hear that I wasn't crazy. And so that's why I kind of write the book I wish I had when I was going through it, because I wanted to know, instead of picking up books that were just presenting the science, I wanted to know how the person who wrote it like came to feel about it, or did they always believe it, or did they change, or what was the path? Because that's what I was going through. So yeah, I'm glad that came through. And it
All right.
was
So the only other question I have is, now that you've done this, and your mom, who's a tea leaf reader, did she have any input to say to you, like, I don't know why you question this? It's just happens and it's natural. So
yeah, she is kind of like that. Yeah, she's kind of like, she's like, I mean, I always knew it was real. She's not pushy about it, though. She never was. My parents are not pushy about their beliefs, but yeah, I mean, she'll just matter of factly state what she believes, and leaves it to you to decide. So it is nice that I'm on the same page as her now, because now I can listen carefully when she talks, and we can share things about these experiences. So it's been nice.
Well, that's good. Well, so I'm gonna, hopefully the book will show up here. So here's the book,
I have it.
Proof of Spiritual Phenomena. Oh, there's your copy too. So the company that I know is called Inner Traditions is the company that gave me the copy of the book. So it can be purchased there. I'm sure it's probably on Amazon.
Yeah.
And can they purchase it through you?
Yeah, it's sold wherever books are sold. I have a website. It's my Mona Sobhani, Ph.D.com, and I have links to order the book there. And you can sign up for a newsletter for news from me. And I also write a psychedelic/altered states of consciousness newsletter. So you can sign up for that also.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. You should sign up
Okay.
for it. You might enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I will. So I'm just gonna say, I think people should buy the book. You know, I guess if I had a top 10 list, it would be on there.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Wow,
Yeah,
very
well,
nice.
you know, I think helping people understand and have a better, you know, not understanding, but grasp, I guess, is like, you know, I'm probably a teacher at heart, but, you know, I never continued in college to be that. So this is, you know, my little teaching moment, I guess. So the book will be reviewed on my October magazine. And so all the information of how to get the book and your contact information will be on there.
Okay, great.
So they'll be able to find that. And so I think we're going to end it. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your kind words about the book. And
Okay.
yeah, I guess, well, my last thing is my personal mantra now is stay radically curious. So I guess I'll leave you with that.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, so let me give it a stop here.